know how long I've been waiting for this? Woo, I'm about to make a name for myself here.
I don't think you guys walk away from this.
You just make sure people know what happened here today.
The U.S. worked with Ecuador to carry out an operation against a designated terrorist organization.
America, while everybody's distracted by Iran and Jasmine Crockett's latest meltdown.
And I'm sliding, I'm riding through the back like fuck. What's that on a beat, bro?
Trump just launched the first ground military operation against drug cartels. U.S. forces on the ground in Ecuador, helicopters in the air, and this wasn't just about drugs. This was about strangling China's supply chain.
For the first time, the U.S. military has carried out a land operation in South America.
But here's what connects Ecuador to Iran. Trump's not just fighting cartels, he's cutting off China's access to the two things they need most: South American cocaine routes and Middle Eastern oil.
Quote, a new phase against narco-terrorism and illegal mining.
What is up, guys? Tyson DeLaCruz here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. Let me walk you through what just happened in Ecuador, because the media is barely covering this and they're definitely not connecting all the dots here. The U.S. military conducted a land operation, not just intercepting boats, not just intercepting drones, boots on the ground, working with Ecuadorian forces to take down cartel infrastructure.
To go after who they're designating as these designated terrorist organizations that have ties to drug trafficking.
Notice the language shift. These aren't criminal organizations anymore. They're designated terrorist organizations. That means specifically that the U.S. military can engage the same way that we went after ISIS and Al-Qaeda. That is a massive legal and operational change here.
In this case, they were not a part of the actual combat mission, if there was any combat, but it really is more like just being close by, within radio range, where they could provide any support in terms of advice of how to carry out the mission.
That is military speak for we're there, we're armed, and if things pop off, we ready. This, my friends, is just the beginning, not the end, of U.S. military involvement in South America.
It might not look like it, but this river is a superhighway for cocaine. Hundreds of tons of that product coming through these waters every single year, bound for Europe and the United States. And as a result, that city right there, Guayaquil, Ecuador, is at war. Rival drug gangs fighting between themselves and the government, vying for supremacy in what has become one of the most important hubs in the global cocaine trade.
Ecuador wasn't always a cartel battleground, but look at the geography. It sits between Colombia and Peru, the world's two largest cocaine producers. The river systems connect natural highways for drug smuggling. And when Ecuador's government got weak, the cartels moved right on in and turned it into their logistics hub. Now, let me show you why Trump launched this operation right now, because the timing of this warfare is absolutely everything. This isn't random, at least in my opinion. It is strategic here.
Ecuador's president last month ordering his cabinet to seek out help from allied nations in fighting cartels.
Ecuador's president requested help from allied nations. This wasn't U.S. invading. This is Ecuador admitting that their police and military can't handle the cartel alone, and they're asking for backup. And Trump said yes because it serves multiple strategic objectives here. Now, here's what the lamestream media won't tell you. When Trump's team captured Maduro, Venezuelan cartel networks got incredibly disrupted. The routes that used to flow through Venezuela, they shifted. Some of them shifted over to Ecuador. So now you've got concentrated cartel operations in one country that's actually willing to cooperate with U.S. military intervention.
Southcom Commander General Francis L. Donovan said, quote, the Ecuadorian people, along with other citizens across the region, have experienced the violence and corrosive consequences of narco-terrorism up close and in their neighborhoods. The time is now for our partners in the Western Hemisphere to take decisive action against this scourge with the assurance that Southcom has their back.
That is the U.S. Southern Command telling every country in the Western Hemisphere, if you're serious about fighting the cartels, we will provide military support. Absolute game changer here. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because Ecuador is only half of the strategy. While Trump's cutting off cartel routes that ultimately supply Chinese money laundering operations nations, he is simultaneously strangling China's oil supply in the Middle East.
Beijing has been purchasing nearly 90% of Iran's crude oil supplies, but since the recent U.S.-Israel strikes on Iran, oil exports coming through the Strait of Hormuz have come to a standstill.
90% of Iran's crude oil was going to China. This wasn't charity. China was buying sanctioned oil at massive discounts while the rest of the world was following international rules. They were saving $8 to $10 per barrel, which adds up to billions and billions of dollars in savings annually.
Oil prices are surging, and now Iran has vowed to attack any ship that tries to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. This comes after a massive U.S.-Israeli airstrike on Iran over the weekend, and now oil is sitting loaded on tankers in the Persian Gulf with nowhere to go. The longer ships can't transit the narrow waterway, the bigger the impact on oil prices.
That narrow waterway off Iran's coast normally handles 20% of the world's oil. And guess where most of that oil was going? Asia, specifically China, India, Japan, and South Korea. When Trump and Israel struck Iran, the waterway closed. Oil tankers are sitting loaded and nowhere to go.
And China is laying out its economic future as the second biggest economy in the world. President Xi Jinping just unveiled a 5-year plan outlining goals for growth, budgets, industrial policy, and defense. In the backdrop, the war with Iran is adding to China's mounting economic issues.
The timing is perfect. China's holding their National People's Congress, their big annual economic planning session where they set growth targets and particular budgets. And right in the middle of it all, their main oil supplier gets bombed and the supply route gets shut down. That is not a coincidence. That is pure strategy. Now, let me break down just how bad China's oil situation is right now, because they didn't just lose Iran. They lost 3 major suppliers in rapid succession.
But before the U.S.-Israel strike, the CCP was importing a little over 1 million barrels of Iranian oil per day, up from 700,000 barrels 3 years ago. The two countries had made a deal that gets around the multiple sanctions on Iran and saves Beijing $8 to $10 per barrel against benchmark pricing. Iran was bypassing the sanctions by shipping its oil through Malaysia and Indonesia. Their arrangement has saved Beijing billions of dollars annually and provided Iran with its primary revenue stream.
China was getting 17% of its oil from Iran and Venezuela combined. Trump captured Maduro, Venezuela gone finito burrito. Now Trump and Israel struck Iran. Iran's supply completely disrupted. That is a huge chunk of China's energy disappearing in a matter of weeks.
China is the world's largest importer of energy. 70% of its oil and natural gas comes from imports, and half of that is from the Middle East.
China imports 70% of its oil and natural gas. They can't produce enough domestically to run their economy. And half of those imports, get this, come from the Middle East. When the Middle East is on fire and supply routes are closed, China's entire economy is at risk. This, my friends, is potentially setting up stagflation in China. Rising oil prices, pushing up the cost while their economy is already kind of slowing down. That is a nightmare scenario for any economy. Prices go up, growth goes down, employment raises, and there's no easy fix.
Trump is now saying, okay, I'll go after your proxies rather than you directly, and I'm going to raise the cost of you doing your global adventurism, and I'm going to lower the cost of us. And that's why all roads lead to China.
Through all the muck, do you see the genius in this particular strategy? Trump isn't going to war with China. He's going to war with China's proxies. Venezuela captured, Iran bombed, cartels that laundered Chinese money, getting designated as terrorists and hunted by the U.S. military. China is getting squeezed like OJ without a single shot being fired at them directly. Now, let me show you who's winning while China is losing, because this isn't just about hurting our enemies. It is about strengthening America.
Southeast Texas is riding a massive energy wave right now. Oil and natural gas jobs are paying way above the state average, with Texas pumping about $27 billion in taxes.
While China is scrambling to find oil, Texas Texas is pumping it. The oil and gas industry in Texas alone generates $27 billion in taxes. That's money going to American schools, American roads, American infrastructure, not to mention high-paying jobs for American workers.
The Energy Information Agency expects a doubling of our current export capacity by 2031.
That means we're not just energy independent. We are potentially becoming the world's dominant energy exporter. Europe needs gas, we've got it. Asia needs oil, we've got it. And we're selling it at market price, not giving it away like China's cheap sanctioned oil.
We've gone from zero to exporting 15 billion cubic feet a day.
That seismic shift spearheaded roughly 90 miles east of Houston at the Golden Triangle, which is Beaumont, Port Arthur, and Orange, Texas. That area earning its nickname back in 1901 after crews discovered the first massive oil field on the Gulf Coast.
Right now, we're on the Port Arthur Canal, less than 10 miles from the Gulf, straddling the Texas-Louisiana state line. And this is one of the premier ports across the globe. We're talking about a golden era for the Golden Triangle, and Golden Pass LNG is setting the standard.
10 years ago, America was a net importer of natural gas. Today, we're exporting 15 billion cubic feet per day and building infrastructure to double that. This is one of the fastest energy transformations in modern history, and it's all American produced, American exported, and American profit. Now, let me connect Ecuador back to Iran, because this is where Trump's strategy becomes absolutely crystal clear. He's not fighting two separate wars. He's fighting one war on two fronts, and both fronts target China.
If Russia agrees to a peace deal with Ukraine, Beijing could lose another big oil supplier.
They get about 18 to 20% of their oil from Russia right now. Peace with Ukraine likely means Russia pivoting back to Europe markets for full price instead of selling discounted oil to China. That's strike 3 against China's energy supply.
Do we see China become involved in an effort to off-ramp this conflict? What I think is important to remember, though, is China has been aggressively buying all commodities for its strategic reserves. And the question is, were they doing so in anticipation of some type of supply outage stemming from a conflict in the Middle East?
China has been stockpiling oil and commodities. They saw this coming. They knew Trump would target their supply chains, so they built strategic reserves. But here is the problem. Reserves, they run out. You can stockpile for months, maybe a year, but if your supply lines stay cut, eventually you're out.
This mission is part of a broader campaign against cartel networks operating across the region.
Ecuador's president called this a new phase in the war against narco-terrorism. That means more operations are likely coming. More countries will likely request U.S. military assistance. And the cartels that launder money for these Chinese criminal networks, they're about to get the full weight of the U.S. military hunting them. Let me quickly explain what we're really watching here, because this is economic warfare at the highest level. Trump's not sending troops to invade China. He's starving them of their resources that they need to actually function as an economy.
If we have a little high oil prices for a little while, but as soon as this ends, those prices are going to drop, I believe, lower than even before.
Short-term oil prices spike and everybody feels the pain. But long-term, once America's increased production comes online and Iran's supply is permanently disrupted, prices drop and America controls the market. That is the ultimate end game. Make America the dominant energy producer while China's left scrambling.
China has been grappling with weak domestic demand and entrenched oversupply. The country's consumer price index remained flat last year, and this was largely due to falling food and energy prices.
China was already struggling with deflation, weak consumer demand, and overcapacity. Now add surging oil costs on top of that. Factories start shutting down because they can't afford energy. Workers get laid off. Consumer prices rise even as unemployment climbs. That is an absolute death spiral for an economy.
The Premier Li Qiang, he delivered the report inside the Great Hall of the People. We were there to watch it, as was Chinese leader Xi Jinping. He was on stage, but just listening. But he set a growth target of less than 5%. Now, It hasn't dropped below 5% in more than 30 years.
For context, China needs about 6 to 7% growth just to maintain employment and social stability. Anything below that means unemployment rises and the Communist Party's grip weakens. And obviously, it's China. They're not going to admit that they're in trouble. America, while you were distracted by Jasmine Crockett's theatrics and media freakouts, Trump just executed a two-front economic war against China that's more devastating than any military conflict. In Ecuador, U.S. forces are on the ground hunting cartels that launder Chinese money and supply Chinese markets with drugs. They're designated terrorist organizations now, which means the full weight of U.S. military can engage them. That's Venezuela, Ecuador, and eventually every cartel route that feeds Chinese criminal networks. In the Middle East, Trump and Israel struck Iran to close the Strait of Hormuz, cutting off 90% of Iran oil exports, almost all of it which went to China. Combined with Maduro's capture eliminating Venezuelan oil, China just lost 17% of its total oil supply in a matter of weeks. And if the Ukraine peace deal happens, Russia's next. Trump didn't start World War III. He's cutting off China's supply lines, oils from the Middle East, cocaine routes from South America, sanctioned trades through the cartels. And while China's economy slides down to stagflation, Texas is pumping $27 billion in energy and taxes, and America's LNG export capacity is doubling. China built their economy on cheap sanctioned oil and cartel money laundering. Trump just eliminated both. And the Communist Party's worst fear, economic collapse, triggering social unrest, is now a real possibility. Let me know what you think about this. Drop it down in the comment section down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. Share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.